back with another episode of Tuesday Talks. And today we have Anashka Bhalla with us. Hello, Anashka.
Hi, Minerva.
I'm so delighted you came up and you're talking about your practice here today with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's morning time in New York, so yeah, I feel fresh.
Thank you so much. It was such an odd hour because of the vast time difference. It was really, not really, but kind of tricky for us to, get up.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm glad you gave us your precious time. Can you brief us a little about your practice, like what it is all about, and
Well, so my practice is a lot about, you know, um, our partition history, and not just our partition history, but also our colonial history. Um, in my works, there is this intentional dialogue between land and face. Um, So you'll see a lot of fractured, haunting portraits that are coupled with landscapes, which is again very intentional. And the idea is that these landscapes they function as metaphors. So you'll see burning lands and spectral ships and scorched seas. And these are symbols of forced migrations and and colonial trade of our past. And that is coupled with these portraits, which are taken from South Asian photographic archives, occasionally from familial images. Of course, there's such a dearth of familial images of that time, because there's just such a big void in memory when we talk about our past. When we speak about partition, it's all very textbook, it's all very academic, but there's barely any there's a few real life accounts, but it's not spoken in the same way that you would say that even the Holocaust is. It's not spoken by a way that is reflective of the kind of tragedy uh,
Mm.
that it really was. So the portraits come from these archives, these South Asian photographic archives, where I really zoom into the photo, like absolutely zoom in, and I capture the humanity of the person. Uh, so again, the thing is that Indian terracotta is a very major material for me because I use material as metaphor. And so it's rendered in a way that is very visceral. You'll see a lot of knife strokes, and that's very intentional. There are two methods of making, when I do landscapes, it's slightly different than when I do portraits. And the idea is that these fractured surfaces and these cracked textures, and even exposed underpaintings, they are visual analogs for historical rupture and psychic fragmentation itself. Um, of course, with terracotta, Indian terracotta, there are associations of land and ancestry, and obviously it's archaeological and symbolic weight. Um, but the general idea is that this sort of decaying and worn surface is supposed to be a site of excavation.
Mm.
It's and terracotta sort of holds the residue of cultural displacement for me. There's this unstable terrain through which memory is being made visible, and um, I feel like even with the works, um, when I'm doing landscapes, for example, there is this idea that the textures are very hazy and rakish, and they imply the elusive and fragmented nature of memory itself. Whereas
Mm.
if you look at the portraits, they're more immediate, they're more visceral. And again, the idea is to reflect the viscerality of the trauma that is carried on through generations.
Mm. Great. That your practice sounds so much rooted to the towards the history, and especially when you talking about the South Asian culture,
Yeah.
and how you mentioned that terracotta, and of course India has a lot of connection together.
Yeah.
I feel your practice is very, very interesting, and I can't wait how it unfolds now that we are going to talk about it. So, like, let me go back to how you actually thought of, coming into this visual art space. Like, how did you think of becoming, you know, a visual artist? Like, what was there any moment or an influence that, you thought that, okay, I want to do this, I want to get into, uh, this thing? How did it all happen?
Well, the truth is that I was always interested in the arts, and it's not just fine art, but also literature and just the many forms of art. But the truth is that I was supposed to be a doctor. I applied to med school. Um, I think I even did a little bit of it, but I was just severely depressed. And it was my parents who suggested that I should perhaps be an artist. They thought that I had some sort of a natural talent and a natural knack for it. I knew that I had an understanding of aesthetics because it's just something that I've grown with my entire life. But I never, you know, I never considered pursuing it as a career. But the fact is that when I was so depressed studying medicine and I was at crossroads with myself, um, that I felt like I had to heed to my parents' advice. And I thought I might as well just give it a shot. So I made a portfolio. I applied to MSU Baroda. I got in somehow. No, I'm joking. But and yeah, so I did my first year, and the first year was supposed to be the trial year for me, and I was supposed to feel it out. How do I feel about this? But you know what? I actually fell in love with what I was doing, and I fell in love with the community. And by the second year, I think I was sure that this is where I wanted to be. I didn't know what was gonna happen next. You know, where I'd be working, if I'd be doing my master's, I had nothing planned out. I just knew the general idea that, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the foreseeable future. And, through the many years, because at this point, I've been working for about a decade. Every year my conviction just grows. Yeah, so there was no defining moment as such, but it was just a slow burn of me realizing that this is what I'm supposed to do with my life.
Your journey sounds very interesting. Like going to a med school, actually, quitting it in the middle of everything, and then, having this great support from your parents
Yeah.
to pursue what you actually, you know, would flourish in. That's a great journey you've been on.
I know there's a lot of happiness. I mean, of course, it's a very arduous and tenuous and just it's a maddening career. Like it's maddening to be an artist, as you would know. Um, but there's also a lot of joy in it. Um, and I think it comes from the joy of creation that you barely find in any other field. Right.
Right.
And I think my parents were right. Yeah.
You, yeah. And what are you doing in New York currently? Are you working on some piece currently? What's taking up your thoughts these days?
So it's pretty much similar to what I spoke about. What I spoke to you right now about was is actually my current or my latest series of works. And I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking at not just um, Indian or sorry, South Asian photographic archives, but also South Asian painting, which is where Krishan Khanna comes into place. He, I refer to him as my historical ancestor. You see glimpses of Amrita Shergill also. I'm very inspired by F.N. Souza and Ganesh Pine, even though it's not very directly visible. They're, again, one of the many historical ancestors to me. I'm also looking at I'm also merging Western influences because I look at a lot of romanticism and romantic paintings, which is why you'll see. references to Turner, for example, in my landscapes, seascapes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I'm exploring right now, and I'm building a current series on that. I have a few upcoming shows in New York. But yeah, that's how life's been. I came here to do my master's at School of Visual Arts, that's SVA, in New York City. I graduated 2 years ago, and ever since then, I've just been showing in America, in New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Canada, and a couple of other places. So yeah, I'm currently working on a few shows.
Great. I hope it's going well.
It is. Thank you.
And so, uh, how do you connect with different mediums? You know, like what is the medium that you're most drawn to, and what is the medium kind of not enjoy? You know, what are those?
Well, so there's obviously a very sculptural element in my work, and they're almost like reliefs. So I'm blending sculpture and painting. I'm trying to find a third medium between it. So I would
Mm.
say that I enjoy sculpture and painting. I did my, when I was at MSU, I actually did sculpture, and eventually it evolved into painting or sort of reliefs. So I enjoy that a lot. Um, I What I don't like is I'm not fond of printmaking, but I'm really trying to be. I'm the thing is, it's a difficult medium for me because I don't understand how my practice, which is so relief and so sculptural,
Mm.
so relief based, how it can be translated into like a single, like into something that it's difficult to hold layers in. That's not entirely true, but of course, not in to the extent of it's very difficult to really to hold layers in printmaking the way you hold in sculpture.
Mm. Yes, yes.
So yeah, that's a point I'm struggling, but I want to explore print in the future.
Printmaking is quite interesting. Even I've worked with printmaking. I've tried my hands on viscosity and lithography, and I also do photographic prints, which is cyanotype and everything. And I think it's just a good medium. There's a lot of possibility to explore more
Yeah,
in printmaking as well. And the fact that I love about printmaking is that like till the very end, you don't know what's going to come. But
yeah,
like compared to painting, when you're painting, it keeps on evolving. Like the moment you're working on it, and it keeps on changing with your thought every day. Every day you're working with on it with a new set of thoughts. But what I found in printmaking was that firstly, it gives you a lot of space to explore, and secondly, it's a surprise. Every print is a surprise. Even if it's the first print, the second print, the last print, it's all these prints are, it's a surprise of what's going to come next. So that's
yeah.
what I love about that's the little element I love about printmaking.
Yeah, I hope to actually explore it in the future. I've done it before, when I was in MSU Baroda, it was compulsory. So I had to learn
Yeah.
and I had to learn etching. But I've just lost practice.
Hmm. I also had printmaking as my optional subject.
Yeah.
We have, and I tried my hands on different printmaking techniques, and it was fun. I think I enjoyed printmaking more than I actually enjoyed painting. Sorry to say this, but yeah, I think I love printmaking. How do you want viewers, to find meaning in your art? Do you like dropping hints for them, or you do not care about what how they perceive your art? You just want to make it and just let it be there. Like, how's that perspective of yours?
I feel like I want it to be a collaborative effort between me and the viewer. When I show in New York or whatever in the US or in the West, it's a very Western audience. That doesn't necessarily mean white, but a Western audience who has no attachment to South Asian history. The
Mm.
idea is that I'm able to produce works that are deeply rooted in my ancestral history, sure, but they should profoundly explore the universal aspects of humanity and the human spirit itself. And the works to serve as sort of psychological studies, um, or of resilience in the face of adversity. When you look at artists like Francis Bacon or Marlene Dumas, especially like
Mm.
Marlene Dumas, who's technically she's talking about apartheid. She's talking about, there is this political element to the work, but there is also this sense of her exploring human existence. Um, and I feel like that's what I want my entry point to be in my art. And the idea is that once people connect with these portraits, with these landscapes, I would hope that they would care to know more about South Asian history. So I want it to be a little bit of collaborative effort where I provide, materials to some extent,
Mm.
and um, and the viewer comes in from the other half, which is why you'll see that there aren't very, overt South Asian symbols in the work. Sure, there are some works where the women are wearing saris or whatever, but it's not overtly South Asian, because
Mm.
I want there to be an international dialogue, because I want that, something that was so significant as our colonial history and our partition history should have an international audience, and that international audience should care enough first to then explore our history.
Was there a change uh, with the reaction of, not reaction, but like, how was it like the transition from Indian audience to audience in New York? Because, of course, like you mentioned, that they don't know much about South Asian history, and how do you make them connect? Like you said that, the women in your works, they're not specifically wearing any South Asian
Yeah,
outfit.
yeah.
But how was that transition of having Indian audience and then audience? Like, was there any transition? Was there any difference you noticed?
So an interesting thing about my practice is that I never really practiced publicly in India. When I was in India and I was working, I was basically in college, and I left college. I graduated immediately to come to New York. So I would
Mm.
say that I entered the market or public perception when I was in the States. And so it's a weird journey where I'm actually trying to also go back to my roots and connect
Mm.
my people in India, um, especially in the Indian art world. Um, but I would say that I was aware, when I was in New York, of this fact that how do I translate my history in a way um, that the Western audiences can connect to. And the thing
Mm.
a very big dialogue in the States is about using material as metaphor. And using Indian terracotta became the easiest way for me to ground my practice, um, in my history, even though I wasn't, also, of course, there was the idea of aesthetics and color. You do associate certain warm tones, earthen tones with
Mm.
Indian art, and
Mm.
you'll see that all over my practice. So there were these little hints, um, because I do want to ease my audience into, I truly want them to connect with the work in a way that is more universal. Um, I want them to see themselves in it. I want them to see, their struggles, or struggles of their ancestors, for example, um, in my works, and then explore our history. So
Mm.
it's yeah, so it's been a bit of a winding road, but I feel like the fact that I use material as metaphor is something that a lot of people in the West, um, I f- and I make it a point to always mention that it's Indian terracotta, and I'm using sort of it as it's holding residue of cultural displacement. It's an unstable
Mm.
grain. of South Asian memory. And I feel like that's a bridge that works.
Hmm. Great. I was very curious, like when you were sharing about the fact that how you're trying to make even audience over there connect
Yeah.
with your art. So it just made me curious about that. What was the transition like? So, how has your relationship changed over the years with your practice and um, with your art? Like since the time you started, you had some kind of a it started with some kind of a relationship. You just quit your med school and then you came studying. Came to MSc. You started studying sculpture. You had, I think you must have built some kind of a relationship. How has your relationship changed with art over the years?
Initially it was very inward looking, and now it has a lot of external influences. Initially it wasn't very political, because I was talking about the trauma of the body, because I had just I was from med school, so it just made sense for me to talk about the human body. And eventually it got me started to wonder, why am I looking at these wounds and these scars? And I realized that it was actually about psychic wounds and psychic scars. And so it was more about the personal. um, I feel like when I came here, or when I was planning to come here to New York, um, there was this tug on my heart that I was very pulled to my homeland, the typical NRI experience. And I realized that this psychic wound perhaps has roots in a more collective trauma that our generation and our parents' generation dealt with, which is the trauma of the partition. I come from the north. I'm Punjabi, so my I actually have, in my family, I have that history of my grandparents fleeing from what is now modern day Pakistan to come to India. Um, and the whole experiences of the refugee camps and everything, of my grandparents losing their parents in the partition struggle. Um, so of course that has carried on over generations in the family, and I believe that that is the experience with a lot of families in India. And what I naively assumed in the beginning was internal psychic scars, or me exploring internal psychic scars, was actually more of a collective experience. And that realization came when, like I said, when I was transitioning to come to New York. And that's when I realized that my work is actually more about the collective than it is about the personal. And so, sure, looking at psychic scars and wounds, okay. But I started to look at South Asian history more deeply, and South Asian literature, and and paintings, whatever. So yeah, that was the transition.
And how does your creative process looks like? When are there any rituals you like to include before you start working, or what it's like? What's your creative process like?
Well, so in my free time, I feel like I'm never free of my creative process, because even in my free time, even when I'm not creating actively, I'm always looking at research papers, or I'm always looking at paintings or whatever. And it doesn't have to be like South Asian necessarily. It's all over the world. It's like global diaspora. Um, and when I actually sit down to paint or sculpt, um, I have these references in mind, and I'm making from memory. There are times when I'm referencing, certain portraits. Like I said, they're derived from South Asian collective archives, or familial images. It's more like me referencing the memory of those. Um, there are basic outlines, there are basic guidelines. Um, but again, it's a very memory based process. Um, as for rituals, I wouldn't say I have any specific ritual as such. Only that I make it a point to always be researching and always be reading as much as I can. Um,
And so, what would be that one advice you'd like to give to the youngsters who are just starting out in the visual art space?
yes, I would say don't be like me. Don't be so inward looking. I know that in India or just anywhere in the world, there is this idea that one must focus on their practice and, sort of isolate themselves from the world and be a hermit. And while that is true when you're searching for your language, it doesn't necessarily, I don't think it's very helpful advice. I feel like you must look for your language while you're in dialogue with the world, with what's happening around you. Because I feel like the most powerful works of art capture the zeitgeist. And to capture the zeitgeist, you must be a part of the zeitgeist. And don't deprive yourself of that experience, which I did. I was a hermit for my first year starting out. And it was only, later on that I started opening myself up to the world. And also realize that you will eventually have to enter a market, or you'll have to interact with people in the art world, and it's not just about your practice. So always keep that in the back of your head.
That was such a wonderful advice. I think as an artist, even I sometimes, have I also get this feeling that what I just want to cut off from the world for a while and just be in my own space, and maybe the ideas will come out eventually. But
Yeah.
I think it is so necessary, and I think it is so important to talk about this, that you should not cut off yourself from the world, and in fact be out there, because you have to be out there. You can't be like, okay, for my just for my practice, okay, I cut off from my world and then again get back to the reality. Why
Yeah.
not just stay into the reality and grow your practice? This is such a wonderful advice. Okay, apart from researching and working, what else do you like doing in your free time?
I actually like going out with friends a lot. Watching movies, I love that. Um, Browsing bookstores, even though a lot of what I buy, I'm never gonna read. Okay, but I'm a compulsive book shopper. And I feel like a lot of people are guilty of this. Um, what else? I'm trying to take tennis lessons as much as I can. Um, yeah. I don't know if I'm good at it though. Um, and I try to go out for a run if time permits. I should do that more. I think the New York skyline is so beautiful. So I think I should definitely be going out on runs. I do it, but not as much as I would like to.
That sounds fun. I think one should always indulge in some kind of sports.
Yeah.
This is my personal opinion, but I don't know, gymming is never my thing. I mean, I tried my hands on it, but I think rather than gymming, why not to invest your time in learning some kind of sports? Like you said that you're going for tennis lessons, and I think it kind of adds on to your skill rather than just going and gymming for like 1 hour of your day. I mean, of course, it is subjective anyway. But this is what I think. I mean, it's fun learning a sport rather than just working out just to kill or burn the calories.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for this conversation, Anushka. It was really, really wonderful talking to you. I got to know so many different things today. Thank you so much.
Of course. I mean, happy to help.